For many years, men have subjugated women based on the assumption that their creative purpose in life is simply to bear children. Worse still, despite women's significant contribution to historical development, their influence is commonly downplayed or ignored in historical literature globally. In Zambia, in the history of the liberation struggle, it goes without saying that most extant literature tends to focus on the more overt actions of male folk, especially those that antagonized colonial authorities in a more militant way. In reference to women, while a few publications do acknowledge women's contribution, this is more often than not in a subtle or more or less trivial manner. However, what very few realize is the fact that during the liberation struggles, much more than charisma or machismo, the primary goal of the liberation movements was mass mobilization, and those that were masters at this art were the women. So what was mass mobilization? How was it critical to the fight for independence, and why were women best suited for this task? By definition, mass mobilization is a process that engages and motivates a wide range of partners and allies at national and local levels to raise awareness of and demand for a particular objective through face-to-face dialogue. Key words to note in this definition are engage, levels, awareness, face-to-face, and dialogue. In other words, to mobilize masses for political action, freedom fighters had to engage people at all levels, especially through one-on-one dialogue. So yes, while the so-called elite male politicians were the drivers of the liberation struggle, women to a great extent were the engine that sustained the movement. Therefore, women in Zambia stood firmly, not behind, but besides their male folk as equal partners in the task of liberating the country. So now, how exactly did they do this, you may ask? Well, some of the methods adopted by Zambian women in the struggle for independence included blocking roads to prevent police and soldiers from entering and disrupting public meetings, demonstrating half naked before the colonial authorities, and other forms of civil disobedience. For example, in 1960, when the colonial government sent police to forcibly break up a rally by black nationalists, a young pregnant Chibesa Kankasa sat on an ammunition box as a way of preventing the police from using it, and her plan succeeded. Another dynamic female personality in the history of Zambia's liberation struggle is Betty Kaunda, wife to first Republican President Kenneth Kaunda. As one of the few trained teachers at the time, she participated in women's active efforts to help their male counterparts with important logistics, including food, which was no mere contribution, as many great thinkers agree that an army marches on its stomach. Another popular, vigilant, and gallant woman of the liberation struggle is the traditional aristocrat, Princess Nakatindi Gangayeta, great-granddaughter to the Lozi King Litunga Lewanika, who was a high-spirited, strong-willed personality and was the first member of the ruling family to join the United National Independence Party unit, paving way for her subjects to equally join the fight. Of course, the participation of women in the struggle for freedom in Zambia cannot be complete without mentioning Julia Mlenga, also known as Mama Chika Monica, who was a rare example of a brave, proud, fearless, and active spirit in political circles. Julia Mlenga was one of the few among both men and women that could stand up and argue with European colonizers, at a time when it was considered taboo for a black person to do so. She was equally extremely competent at recruiting more women members and sensitizing them about discrimination and ill treatment by Europeans towards Zambians. A true master at mass mobilization. It is painfully clear that in many different ways, women showed their total support and played a key role in the fight for independence. Interestingly, women were equally active in some of the early mass protests on the mines and in the villages as vocal opponents, encouraging men to behave more aggressively. To be sure, leaders of the Ndola Anti-Federation Action Group recall one man objecting to women attending meetings because they were, according to this man, dangerous. And indeed, women spurring men had caused riots on many occasions. Or during the liberation struggle, women played a key role. While men decided the overall strategic direction of the struggle, it was the women raising funds, catering for meetings, housing nationalist leaders, running funeral committees, and recruiting masses that were the real driving force behind the movement.